Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. Others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
Childhood nostalgia!
Is anybody there? Hello and welcome, listeners, to episode 86 of Movie Oubliette, the bi-hemispherical podcast with me, Conrad, recovering from the shock of attending a garden party in Cambridge, UK.
And me, Dan, enduring one day of no gas here in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh my. We focus on sci-fi, fantasy and horror films because we love lucid dreaming experiments, magic pencils that can create worlds, and surreally disfigured versions of our fathers chasing us with hand tools. Hello, Dan.
Of course.
How are you?
Yes, I am good. How are you, Conrad?
Yes, I'm very well. Yeah, just as I say, recovering from the shock of being around people, which is really disconcerting.
Yeah. For you. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and down here in Australia, we did have a good handful of months where everything was open. We had no masks and you could hug and that sort of thing. But we had like 0 cases. I think it's a different story in the UK. You still have quite a few cases.
We do. We have quite a few cases, although they're not going up anymore. I think they're sort of plateauing or tailing off.
Well, that's good.
So
Reassuring.
that is good, yeah. And luckily we had a sunny day, so we had a staff get together at work and about 100 people turned up.
Right.
And we were just outside eating packed lunches, staying a metre away from each other, no hugging, no handshaking, outside in the fresh air. So it was okay, I guess, but still, I have to say I was kind of, a little bit anxious about it. And glad when it was over. But you know, baby steps, I guess.
Meanwhile, over here, we had a gas inspection.
Oh.
And they found out we had a leak. So they turned it off immediately. So we had one day where we had no gas in the house, which is our hot water, our stovetop oven, and our heating. Yes, interesting day. Had a very cold shower.
Yeah, so cold and eating cold food, presumably.
Well, we've got a few other kitchen appliances. We've got a pressure cooker, and a microwave, and also a barbecue with a gas cylinder. So we managed, but
right.
At least it was only one day, and then the next day a plumber came and fixed it all and found the leak, and back to having heating again.
Yeah, which is good because it's winter there, isn't it, right now?
I mean, it is warming up a little bit, but yeah, it is still a bit cold.
Oh, well, I'm glad you've got that back.
So, Conrad, have our listeners been talking to us?
They have indeed, yes. A Wicked Person commented on Sandy King Carpenter's interview about Ghosts of Mars, where she was talking about Joanna Cassidy, and I think she said something about her flying through windows and then added in Blade Runner, but Wicked Person didn't get that and said, I love the idea that Joanna Cassidy herself generally flies through windows on a regular basis, like in her private life.
Right.
I wouldn't put it past her. She's a gutsy lady.
I just can imagine her house not having any doors, just windows.
Yeah. Because whenever they put one in, you know, the family comes home and it's all shattered. It's like, oh, Joanne.
Yeah.
Just can't be trusted. Jason on Ghosts of Mars said, I've always felt this was an underrated film. I'd love for this film to be excavated and reevaluated, and I'm checking out your older episodes. You guys gotta do Slipstream and Millennium, both from the late 80s. So yes, thanks, Jason. Interesting recommendations.
Yeah, I think I snagged a copy of Slipstream on one of my not so recent thrift store explorations. So, yeah.
I'd like to check that out because I think that was one of Mark Hamill's first films post Star Wars.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, Luke
Interesting.
Skywalker's in there with a beard, looking rugged, if I remember rightly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I only see him as rugged these days, so.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. Speaking of rugged, we also heard from Matt Swafford of Reclaimers Vintage Toys on Reign of Fire, specifically the conceptual artwork we posted by Juan Pablo Roldan, which displayed the main character as being a fireman. And Matt says, I remember first reading about this flick in a coming soon blurb, and I think it was in Maxim magazine or something like that, and they described Christian Bale's character as a fire chief.
Oh.
Must have been a holdover from an earlier draft, and this pic just jarred that memory loose from my brain.
I think it would have been a really interesting film if they went that route.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he does have a scene where he walks through the flames in sort of protective fireman-like
That's right.
gear.
That's
but-
right.
Yeah. And Nick Hardy said it was interesting when you talked about how some post 9/11 films had the threat already in the world or under the ground and not from other worlds. Looking at this painting and seeing a firefighter as the hero really hits this point home.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So maybe it was too on the nose. Maybe that's why they changed it.
Right. That does make sense.
Yeah, really interesting. On your favourite Matthew McConaughey role, Eddie Coulter said, it's hard to choose just one role of McConaughey's that's my favourite, so I had a three-way tie. Lone Star, The Lincoln Lawyer, and Mud.
Right,
I don't think I've seen any of those.
I've seen The Lincoln Lawyer and Mud. Yeah, Mud's a great film. It's I think it was more of a slow burn type movie, much more sort of retrospective, but I haven't seen it for a while. Lincoln Lawyer that was a really interesting film. It's one of those kind of thriller loophole type movies, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. What, like a legal courtroom?
I think so.
Drama.
I haven't seen it in a while. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. We also heard from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures on Reign of Fire.
Of course.
Hello, Serge.
Hey, Serge.
He said, feels like the phrase so much better than it had any right to be was specifically invented for Reign of Fire. It's got a silly pitch and an even sillier marketing campaign, and yet I think it's super clever, exciting, emotional, and sports one of my top 5 favourite lines of all time. I will literally never write a line half as good as, quote, now we can do this easy, or we can do this real easy. Which we didn't pick, but it is a very good line.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, I bet Matthew McConaughey had a good time saying that line.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. He also said, Movie Oubliette reviewed this one this week, and it's really the most fun that a listener like me could possibly have. I knew I loved it, but neither Dan nor Conrad had ever seen it, and, podcast spoiler alert, they both really liked it. Welcome to the fold, fellas.
Yes, I mean, that's the dream for a listener, to have both the hosts of a podcast love the movie that they also love.
Yeah. And also, it's the dream for us. I mean, the reason we did this was not so that we could make fun of terrible movies for an hour. It was so that we could discover things that we haven't seen before and
yes.
really enjoy them. So,
Yes, that's true.
So yeah.
I do also like making fun of terrible movies, but
Yeah, it's true.
a win-win
there's no
situation.
downside here. Yeah. So thanks, everyone, for getting in touch. We love
Yes.
hearing from you.
yes, we do. Okay, speaking of, Conrad, what are we doing today?
Well, let me amble on over here and pull open this hatch. Oh, it's strange. It seems to be like a weird house in the middle of nowhere down here now.
Oh, okay. Does it have a chimney?
Yeah, but it's really wonky. Just go inside.
What's that noise?
Well, there seems to be a radio, but the station's terrible.
Anna, let me in, Anna.
Oh my, I think somebody's trying to come in. She's not here. Oh, I found the movie. I'm coming back.
Oh, it's dangerous around here. Dangerous.
Okay, I'm back.
So what do you have, Conrad?
So I have with me the 1988 British dark fantasy film Paper House, directed by Candyman's Bernard Rose.
Ah, so this is going to be a childhood nostalgia episode. So this is from your childhood, Conrad?
It is indeed, yes, it's from my childhood, so it is.
Childhood nostalgia.
Yes, fun to be back in childhood nostalgia. It's based on a children's novel, in fact, Marianne Dreams by Catherine Storr, and it stars Ben Cross, Glenn Headley, and the children are Charlotte Burke and Elliot Spears.
Right. And what happens in this childhood movie of yours, Conrad?
Well, Anna has an average life for an 11-year-old schoolgirl in 80s Britain. She's estranged from her father, argues with her mum about riding lessons, and gets detention a lot. But suddenly, she falls ill, starts to faint, and begins having recurring dreams that she's visiting a strange, isolated house that she drew herself in class. After drawing a face at the window, she meets a pale boy her age in the house, Mark, who can't walk and who may or may not also exist in the real world. While convalescing in bed with glandular fever, mono to our US listeners, Anna plots to help Mark leave the dream house by adding her father to the drawing, but scribbles it out and screws up the picture when her mum criticises her drawing technique. Harsh. The next time she sleeps, the house is a dark, ruined place, and her disfigured father appears on the horizon brandishing a hammer. As her fever becomes life-threatening and the distinction between reality and dreams begin to crumble, can Anna and Mark escape the horrors of Paper House?
Oh, exciting.
It is, yes. And even more exciting, we have a very, very special guest to talk to us about this movie. The director himself, Bernard Rose.
Wow.
Yes.
I bet he's got some great details about this film.
He does indeed. So, yeah, after the break. Joining us today is an accomplished director who's worked in an impressive array of genres, from the historical romance of Immortal Beloved to the action-adventure of Samurai Marathon, but he's best loved among fans of our favourite genres for helming the milestone horror film Candyman and today's topic, the dark fantasy Paper House. I'm very excited to welcome Bernard Rose. Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Well, it's very kind of you to take the time to speak to us. How have you been doing during these strange times that we're living through?
Well, actually, I've been kind of busy. I made a film which is going to open in limited theatrical release in the US in October, which I made with Tony Todd from Candyman, which was a strange little film that we made actually in May of 2020. Quite illegally, I hasten to add. And it's kind of quite a scabrous little film. I describe it as a remake of The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie for the coronavirus. But Tony plays a Uber driver who's delivering food to wealthy people at the top of Mulholland Drive. And he happens to be delivering people and food to the house of a fanatical kind of NXIVM-style preacher played by Danny Houston. So bad things happen, as you might imagine.
I'm sure, yes. What's that called?
It's called Traveling Light.
Okay.
Yeah, and it stars Tony Todd, Stephen Dorff, Danny Houston, amongst others. There's quite a good cast.
Wow. Okay.
Basically.
Well, we're going right back to your very first feature film, I believe. Is it technically your first theatrical feature film? Because you'd worked on some things for the BBC before, isn't that right?
Yes, it's not my first full-length film, but it's my first theatrically released film. I made 2 films for the BBC prior to that. Mm-hmm. One of them was Smart Money, which was also written by Matthew Jacobs. And the other one was Body Contact. And it's been completely forgotten. I don't even think a copy of it exists anymore.
Right. Okay. Well, it's actually quite difficult to find Paper House, the film we're talking about today. It's on Amazon Prime in the UK at the moment, so I was able to revisit it. How did you first become involved in the movie?
Well, the book was brought to my attention by Anne Tilby, who was the art director on the movie. It had appealed to her because I think the whole idea of the drawing becoming concrete as a sort of visual idea excited her, and to the extent that she had contacted Catherine Storr, the author, and optioned a book from her, and actually gone as far as writing a screenplay. And she got me involved, and I was very intrigued by it, and I wasn't quite sure why, but I wasn't convinced by her screenplay. So I then read the book, and I liked the book, but I, again, wasn't quite sure about it. It's a rather peculiar book. It is a young adult book, like what they would now call a young adult book.
Yeah.
But it's kind of verging on a children's book, really. The underlying theme of the book is a kind of coming of age, I guess. But I think it had something very unusual in it that I didn't quite understand. And later when I met Catherine Storr, and of course, she was herself a child psychologist, and she was married to another very well-known child psychologist called Anthony Storr. So I guess it was something that she knew about intimately from, an analytical point of view. And I think that underpinning of psychoanalysis to the way the dreams are described in their progression is part of what gives the book a kind of universal, slightly peculiar appeal. Anyway, I then wrote a somewhat different treatment based on the book, which incorporated some of Anne's ideas and also things taken from the book. And I then sold the project to Tim Bevan at Working Title. Tim and I were friends at that period because Tim was producing music videos. We'd done Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Bronski Beat and all kinds of fun early 80s activities. And Tim was wanting to really get into movies very much, and he hadn't made a movie at this point. And I do believe that actually Working Title, one of the very first things that they actually ever developed was Paper House. It might even have been the very first.
Wow, okay.
And it took a while. We hired Matthew Jacobs, who was a very good friend of mine from film school, and someone I knew was a talented writer. So he liked it very much, and we hired him to write the screenplay, or rather Tim hired him to write the screenplay. And during that time, Tim got his production arm together more, and, he was starting to have some success because Beautiful Laundrette was very successful, obviously. All the usual suspects in the British film industry just took one look at the project and went, no. Because it didn't fit within the purview. The UK film industry has always had basically two things it likes, which is social realism or literary adaptations of classic novels in period. But if you're not in those genres, no. And horror has always been a very debased genre to those people. And so, there was no funding in the UK for this film. Nobody wanted it. It was this weird little movie about a little girl who has dreams. And is it a children's film or is it a horror film? No one really had a good answer for that. And actually, honestly, that question was never answered, which is probably why no one ever saw it. The film was basically saved from oblivion by a man called Dan Ireland, who worked for a company called Vestron Pictures, who were the quintessential late 80s video company who'd made a bundle off of the VHS boom. And they'd gotten into production. They'd started funding their own films because in that era, being a video distributor and a successful video distributor was being vertically integrated. They were paid like £100 in cash for a VHS tape. I mean, it was a fabulous business. So you could fund to a decent level a movie, provided it had the right name, the right box, the right genre, a couple of things you had to fit into so it could be stacked in the right shelf. And Dan, to my joy, just for some reason, he read it and was deeply moved by it and wanted to make it. And he sort of rammed it down Vestron's throat. And the money came through and we were off to the races, Tim and I, and we just made the film. And like I said, it was a very lean period at Pinewood Studios. They were almost closed. There was nothing going on there.
Right.
So we managed to get the biggest stage there for pittance. Now, of course, you can't get in there.
No.
We had the H stage, which is the largest proper stage in the main building there. And we built the whole nightmare landscape and everything. And we went down to Exmoor and built the whole house on the real moor as well. But I would say the film is 80% shot at Pinewood Studios. Really? Yeah. Wow. And all those big night things, they're all on that huge stage and the painted backdrops, and the moor was a set, literally was built and turfed, and it was all indoors.
Wow. Except, I guess, for the initial reveal, which is just so strange and eerie when that enormous crane shot where the house seems to grow out of the horizon.
That's Exmoor.
Right.
We wanted to shoot there because it was just this completely featureless landscape. It was just a brown moor and a clear sky, and you could stick the house on it. And of course, we did stick the house on there, and that was fine. It was just a facade.
Right.
Except that was when they had the hurricane in 1987. There was a hurricane blew through the UK.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Famous hurricane, the one that was not advertised by the weatherman.
No, poor Michael Fish.
The Michael Fish hurricane, as it's become known,
Yes.
came through and just flattened the set. I mean, there was nothing that was going to save it sticking there on export, But they put it back up and we carried on. But it was one of those, oh yes, the hurricane's just blowing your set down moments. Yes.
Yeah. In terms of adapting the screenplay when you were developing it, did you work really closely with Matthew Jacobs to sort of decide which elements you were going to pull out and which you were going to replace? Because there are some key differences.
That's correct. Well, I think the biggest difference was, if you've read the book, you'll know that the threat in the book comes from these stones that have eyes and move around, basically. And in the pre-CGI era, this didn't feel like a good idea at all.
Right.
It felt like the sort of thing that was going to look really, really bad. I mean, you do see the stones in the film and, you do feel the menace from them, but they're not driving it. They're not having to do all the lifting work in the nightmare part of the film. So I was very worried about doing them. I mean, it could have been animatronics. I had quite a lot of experience with animatronics because I worked on Dark Crystal for Jim Henson back in 1980, but I also knew what its limitations were.
Yes.
And so it was a question of finding what could replace those things. And it was Matthew who came up with the idea of making the father the antagonist, basically, in the nightmare, a nightmarish version of her father, which is sort of what the Stones are anyway. Although I wouldn't really like to speak for Catherine, who's no longer with us, but I think she was a strict Freudian.
Okay.
And obviously the Stones are phallic. I mean, actually, I do remember Catherine Storr coming onto the set at Pinewood and seeing all these stones and going, oh, she said, I wrote a very sexy book. She didn't mind that change. I know. She regarded the film as very different from the book, quite rightly. I mean, and that's the fundamental difference. But I think although it's different in terms of how it's depicted, it's not different thematically.
No.
To what she was after.
The choice of the father as the antagonist is quite interesting because there isn't that much of a sense in the movie that Anna is afraid of her father. In fact, she expresses the fact that she misses him. I think he works away from home.
That's right, yes.
But she does say something about not liking him when he's drunk.
That's right.
Is there a sense that there might be some violence in the house? Or
Well, I think so, because that's the whole point of the big jump scare when she's taking the picture of him and he's smiley and then suddenly he's not. That there is an implication of some buried bad memories in there. Yeah. I mean, absolutely, it's part of it.
The movie focuses on, as many fantasy films do, on a girl on the cusp of womanhood.
Yes.
Anna is so definitely depicted as being on the borderline. She's trying on makeup, she's asking about snogging boys, but she still wants to play hide and seek. And Charlotte Burke brings her to life so vividly and so naturalistically. She's got much more of a hard edge than, say, like a Grange Hill character. Was it difficult to find her in the casting process?
It was terribly difficult to find her. And, we went through many, many, many kids of different kinds. And then it is that thing of them being on the cusp that's so difficult. And also, I think she's meant to be 11 in the film. But the advantages of casting a 13-year-old are massive in terms of the number of hours they can work. And she's in every single scene. I think we kind of worked out that it was impractical to make the film with an 11-year-old.
Right.
Because we just couldn't work them enough hours. I mean, it's quite strict,
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between 11 and 13, also in terms of anybody's development. So I was terribly happy when we finally found Charlotte, like at the 11th hour, because Charlotte was 13, but she looked 11. And she still had the air of an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
And also, I think that one of the things that was great about her is that she was kind of a little bit androgynous. And I think that really helped the part too. And she was feminine, but she was never girly. You know what I mean? She was interested in those things like the makeup and the boys, but not only as an intellectual game, you know? And I think that was kind of... It gave her a really interesting quality. And I think a lot of kids, very unusual for a kid in a movie, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Well, she is a very engaging presence, and she does have a lot on her shoulders if she's in every single scene.
And it was very difficult for Charlotte, who was not a professional actor and who has never been in a film since.
No.
Not one.
Did something happen that put her off forever, or was it just one of those things where it didn't translate to adulthood? I mean,
I think the short answer is she didn't want to do it after that. I think it did put her off. I think it's exciting if you're that age and you're cast as the lead in a film. But then I think once she actually started doing it, 13-year-olds are not used to that kind of sustained pressure and workload in that she was in every morning at 6 a.m. And I think she had no clue how to cope with that. And I think that she became tired. And I think that the film itself started to affect her. Especially we shot the stuff outside first and the stuff on the locations. And we ended up in the studio doing the night stuff and all the nightmarish bits were the last things we did. And by the time we got to that, honestly, the set was huge and it was vast. And there was Ben Cross on the hill with his hammer. And I think he scared her. In fact, I know he did. At one point, he terrified her and she refused to come into the set because she was afraid. And, you know, but she was a tough kid. And she got angry with me that time because I think it was when he comes in and smashes through the glass. And she didn't know the glass was prop glass and sugar glass. She didn't know he was coming. I was just going to capture her reaction. And indeed I did. But I think it genuinely frightened her and she got upset and she called me into her dressing room and she said, if you spring anything on me again, I'm out of here. And I was like, oh, Charlotte, please, I'm so sorry. Then I was frightened, you know. I mean, she was tough. She's a lawyer now.
Really? Okay.
I haven't spoken to her in a long, long time, but I did have a conversation with her in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
She just said that she'd seen the film as an adult and that she was very proud of it. And she was very happy to have done it.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, what happened to Elliot, the little boy, is much more tragic. I mean, I think Charlotte is, as far as I know, she's doing well.
Yeah. You mentioned Elliot.
Yes.
By contrast, he seems much more of a natural, not overtrained. He'd been in Jim Henson's The Storyteller.
Afterwards,
okay.
Yeah, because like I said, I knew Jim at that period very well, actually. And Jim saw the movie and cast him from my movie. So.
Really? Okay,
yes.
That's the order.
Yeah.
But I mean, he seems like a natural. I mean, he's so hauntingly memorable as Mark, the mysterious boy in the window.
Yeah, I think it's really a tragedy what happened to Elliot because I think he was a very talented actor. He was an actor, you know, and he took it very seriously and he was trained and
okay.
I think his parents were actors and he was just really into the idea of being an actor in a way that Charlotte wasn't.
Yes.
And so they were a little bit at odds in terms of their style like that.
Yeah. And did they have a good relationship on set? Because one thing that they have in the film that they don't quite as obviously have in the book is a romantic spark between them.
Yeah.
That even leads to a kiss at the end of the movie.
It does, which when I think about it, is so utterly wrong. It's good, but it sort of pays off what she said, asking for at the beginning. I think it's an experiment, but then I think the trouble is that she does feel romantically. I mean, I don't think it's really a romance, but I think she sort of falls for him. That's sort of the point.
Yeah.
But no, is the short answer. They fought each other. But that's pretty typical of kids that age.
Yeah, boys and girls are not really big fans of each other at that age, I don't think.
No, and they were very nervous about doing that scene, and I only did it once, and that was enough. It was enough for everybody.
Glenn Headley, who plays Anna's mum,
yes,
obviously an American actress. One of the things that I do find jarring watching the film is it's pretty apparent that all of her dialogue has been looped.
Yes.
Why was that? And who is it?
Well, no, she looped it herself.
Okay.
She didn't do it that way when we shot it. She did it in her own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was better. It felt more natural. But when the film was finished, the people at Vestron, who were Dan's bosses, to say that they loathed it would be an understatement. They were like, what is this piece of shit that we've paid for?
Oh.
So, when people get into that kind of flop sweat, they're looking for things to change that they magically think will fix it. The 80s was the era of let's revoice. For some reason, that became one of those default fixes people went to. And they thought the problem was that, why is this American woman with a British family? Well, of course, why not? It's not really that surprising. So they were like, no, she has to be revoiced. So I did revoice her. I mean, I don't mind saying this now because Glenn very sadly also passed away a couple of years ago, quite prematurely.
Yeah.
So actually, Frances Barber came in and looped her. And that version is more successful. But Glenn got wind of this and quite rightly, violently objected and said, no, you have to let me try and do it myself. So she came in and redid it herself. And she did, I think she did a sterling job for what is very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So we ended up using that. But the version with Frances's voice, which I have a print of, which I screen sometimes, is better. I'm sure that, if somebody wants to come out with a special Blu-ray edition, those deliverables exist in an easily transferable form.
Heads up, Arrow Video or Scream Factory or
exactly
one of those outfits. Yeah. Well, talking about sound, the film score.
Yes.
You were working with Hans Zimmer from the period when he was being mentored by the British composer Stanley Myers.
Well, Stanley worked on the film too, yes.
Yeah. How did that come about and what was it like working with the two of them? What were you after?
Well, I first met Hans, actually, I think I first met him through Trevor Horn when I was doing, because he was in a band with Trevor. He was in the Buggles, everyone forgets.
Of course, yeah. Video Killed the Radio Star.
I didn't quite know Hans from his Buggles days, but I knew him not long after that when he was working with Stanley in Lily Yard in Fulham. I liked Stanley very much, and he was working on the score for Smart Money. I needed some stuff that was more modern and more sound designy, and Stanley was like, really, that's going to be much better for my assistant, Hans. I was like, oh, okay. So I started working with Hans. And Hans was doing some cues, some sound design. It's funny to think of it now, but
yeah.
And we got along, and he was always a very super charming guy, Hans. And when it came to doing Paper House, because I'd enjoyed working with Stanley so much, I hired Stanley to do the score. And Stanley did the score. He did the full thing on his own, actually without any involvement from Hans, because I think he really liked the movie, and he and I had worked on it together so that it was all going to be based on Fauré's Requiem.
Yeah.
And actually, I think the score was very effective, if you want the truth. And it was much, much, much lower key. And the movie was a lot more silent. It was much more lightly scored. There were long periods without music. I wanted the film to be very atmospheric and almost silent. And this was one of the things that Vestron just fucking loathed about it.
Oh.
And they said, more music, please. So I went back, and Stanley was busy, and I said to Hans, what are we going to do? And Hans was like, don't worry, I'll do it for you. And it was literally Hans on his own in the studio, nobody helping him at all. And he programmed the whole damn thing. But Hans had, in Lily Yard, he had the original Moog from Wendy Carlos.
Oh, wow.
On the wall. It was just a bunch of switches. It was huge. He still has it in LA. He had it shipped over here.
Yeah.
It's very valuable now. I think it's historic. And it was Wendy's thing that she wrote Clockwork Orange on. God knows how. So I wanted to play with that because it was such an iconic piece of machinery. So we set it up to do some crude riff, and it had flaws in it because it was old and it didn't completely work anymore. And I wrote a little stupid thing that's in the car sequence with Hans. But Hans, the rest of it was all Hans on his own on the Synclavier. And Hans was really wanting to take opportunities to show what he could do, and how he could make something grander and bigger. And he did that. And he added quite a lot to the movie. It changed the movie. I don't actually love all of it. I love some of what he did. I love the first theme, and I love the really nasty parts of it that he did. But the end title cue, which was we'd already done it and delivered it and finished it. and they were asked us to go back and redo the end title cue. We used to have the last piece of the Fauré Requiem over that, which was a lot less bombastic. So that they were after so much bombast that by then Hans and I were kind of almost making fun of it and going, okay, let's just make the most ludicrously bombastic thing you can imagine. And indeed it is.
Yes.
And of course, Hans came to Hollywood and no bombast was too much bombast. It turned out.
Of course, yeah.
Now it's time for random trivia.
So for trivia, Mr. Rose, while we have you, there's something I've always wanted to ask. The radio in the paper house.
Yes.
What is that ungodly noise coming out of it?
Good question. Yeah, good question. The answer is unpleasant, unfortunately. It's actually Nigel Holland found this thing and I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. What's that? It's terrifying. It was Hitler.
Really? Wow.
It's a recording from the Nuremberg rallies.
Wow.
It's Hitler and the sort of, there's all the crowds cheering him. But it's processed, and I think it's backwards, so you can't pick out any German words. But if you listen to it, it's got that sort of Hitlerian
delivery to it. Yeah, it sounds awful.
It does.
Yeah.
It's awful, and it's aggressive, and it's angry, and it's Hitler.
Wow.
So there you go.
There you go. That's a fascinating piece of trivia.
Yes.
Neither the book or the film ever resolves the question of whether this is entirely a fantasy on Anna's part, or whether this is in some way related to reality, and whether you thought about her and Mark meeting in real life, perhaps.
Yes, I think that would have been a disaster.
Right.
To have them meet in real life. I think, yes, you don't know, of course, whether it's entirely her fantasy or not. But one of the interesting things that the film plays with is that within a movie, a dream and reality are exactly the same. That's one of the odd natures of movies. And that's usually why dream sequences in films can be so awful, because essentially everything in a film is a dream. It's not real, and there is literally no difference between a shot of somebody that's in so-called reality and a shot of somebody that's in a dream. I mean, it's the same. They're both situations are just as fake. And it was very apparent when we were shooting because it was mostly a studio film. And one of the things that I was very happy to play with is like when you see the stuff in her bedroom, quite obviously the views out of her window are not real. They're trans-like photographs. So in that sense, from an expressionistic point of view, the entire film is completely from her point of view. So anything that she knows about Mark or not Mark or her doctor or her mother or her father, it's entirely subjective. And I think there's no other possible way to interpret it. So what parts of it are objectively true? Couldn't tell you, and I don't know, really.
Yeah.
None of it, I guess.
And I think that's the thing that's probably quite bewitching about the film and makes it so memorable for those who were lucky enough to catch it first time around or who have discovered it since. I think that is the element. And I'm wondering if that's something that either led to you being involved in Candyman or if it was something that you brought to Candyman, because that again plays with hypnosis and a breakdown in reality in a way that has deeply disturbed viewers ever since.
No, that's right. And I played with some of the same things in Candyman in as much as Helen's apartment is a set.
Yeah. And
the view outside the window of Cabrini Green and the south side of Chicago is a translate. It's not real. They're in a studio, and the whole interior of the apartments in Cabrini Green that match hers, these are all sets too. And there is the sort of dark mirror version of the apartments in Cabrini and her apartment in Sandburg Village in Candyman are very similar to the idea of the confluence between Charlotte's bedroom and the house on Exmoor,
Yeah.
Or the house inside H stage at Pinewood.
Yeah. Well, it's an absolutely spellbinding movie. How do you look back on it now? What do you think its legacy is?
What really shocks me is the film is now 34 years old.
Yes.
And when I was born, Battleship Potemkin was 34 years old. And if I think about films from when I was born in 1960 to Battleship Potemkin, well, that's a very big difference into even what constitutes a film between those two moments.
Yes.
Any film that's even slightly remembered after that length of time is a small miracle, I think. But it has been very influential on other films, I think.
Yes.
in a number of different instances of people who've said that they were influenced by it.
Right.
The biggest one is Pan's Labyrinth.
Yes.
It's almost a remake.
Yeah.
And then there was a film that Neil Gaiman wrote called Mirror Mask, which I probably could have sued him for. And also, I think The Lovely Bones, there's some direct rip-off of Paper House in The Lovely Bones. But look, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I think Peter Jackson has actually acknowledged the debt to Paper House.
I think Del Toro did too.
Yeah.
There are things in Pan's Labyrinth that are direct copies. The drawing and the reality, the monster with no eyes, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, the films are very different in tone.
Yeah, but I think you can see the seeds in there and how the film has affected people. Yeah. And I think it is a film that stays with you once you've seen it. Certainly, speaking for myself, I caught it on television as a child in the 90s, and it's stayed with me ever since. So it's been a real thrill to speak to you about it. Thanks so much for taking the time to share your memories of it.
Well, thank you so much. It was lovely to talk to you.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye now.
And we're back. Oh, that interview with Bernard Rose. Amazing.
Yes. I'm so sorry you couldn't be there.
Yes, I think
you had a very good reason why you couldn't be there.
I just had the first jab and I was having some rather troublesome side effects. Yeah.
Yes, your immune system definitely noticed the jab, so that's good, but yeah, not great for interviewing famous directors.
Yes, it was a tedious 48 hours recovering from that.
Yeah.
But you did a